All right, hello once again. YouTube is taking its sweet time to beam me in. Here we go. So it's time once more for Odinmade Hero. We're going to do day 78 today of me following Casey Muratori's Handmade Hero, where he programs a game from scratch in C and C++, while I do it in the Odin programming language. Yesterday, or not yesterday, but Monday, get my days mixed up, we were working on just continuing to clean up this notion of traveling up and down in the Z direction in our 2D game world so that we can go up and down floors or levels, if you will. And just trying to figure out how to handle the way that all works together, because it's not obvious at first. There's a lot of things you have to think through, and Casey has been thinking through them as we move along. And the last thing that we came up against here was moving up between floors. You can see there's this like transition period where if we're down on the original floor, but we're kind of halfway up this ramp or staircase, if I kind of just jump over to the left or the right here, I can kind of hop off the edge of it, which might even be desirable, right? Like gameplay wise, if we're down here, you know, and I want to not have to walk all the way down the ramp, maybe I can just hop off of it. But if we're up on the next level, we can kind of like scoop ourselves out of the staircase, but then we can't drop back in. So I think it's just a matter of like having some kind of logical consistency to how those things work, because if I can climb out, I should be able to drop back in as well. And to me, that kind of seems more like 3D-esque in a way. Like I'm imagining, you know, where you're climbing on top of terrain. Maybe you had to like do some kind of platforming or free climbing to get up onto another level, and then you can just drop back down to that next level, right? So technically I could choose to walk down the staircase or the ramp conceptually, or I could just kind of jump down the opening, right? Because right here you can kind of see we're peering down into that next level. So these are just things that I'm thinking about. They're not really relevant to exactly how Casey wants them to work or how we'll even build things in the end. But those are the things that are occurring to me as I'm working through this. It's very funny how deep you can get on just something as seemingly trivial as this without any other sort of gameplay stuff happening, you know? So we'll just keep chugging along here. Going to kick off day 78, where we'll be handling multiple collision volumes per entity, and this pertains exactly to this staircase thing that we're dealing with now. So I'll go ahead and let Casey kick things off.
The show. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to another episode of Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on Twitch. No engines, no libraries, just us and our cunning to the extent that we do have it on certain days. Admittedly, you know, some days are better than others. You know, not everyone is cunning all the time. Sometimes you're only half cunning or a quarter cunning. Heaven help you on the days when you're negative cunning, but you know, it happens to everyone sometimes. And I'm sure it's happened to us already. In fact, I'm pretty sure it has happened to us already, and it'll happen to us in the future. But maybe we can avoid having today be one of those days. Because I thought of something last night when I was going to bed. I thought of something about what we have been doing that I think is an improvement, and so I wanted to talk about it today. It was kind of an obvious thing. I had not thought about it in this way before, but I am thinking about it this way now. And so, yeah, I kind of like to go over it with you and see what you think. Before I get started, however, let's go ahead and say that anyone who has pre-ordered the game on handmadehero.org should have gotten a link in their email to download the source code. So if you want to use that source code to follow along, today is day 78. So what you want to do is unzip day 77 source code out of the zip file, and that will allow you to follow along with exactly the same source code I'm starting with today. So let's get started. Here is the thing that I thought of yesterday that I probably should have thought of, but sometimes it's better if I don't think of these things. I mean, one of the nice things about the fact that the stream is periodic and I'm not thinking about it all day, I only think about it, you know, at night or whatever, is that I don't come up with things perhaps as quickly, and that allows you to see me do something less good and then move it towards something better. We've already seen that happen with a bunch of stuff, like the sim regions, I think, with that, and the tile chunks, or the world chunks, and so on. Like we've constantly had that kind of happen, and some of those were intentional. Like sometimes I intentionally start out with something simple rather than guessing at the final sort of good thing and trying to go directly towards it because I want to show it. But other times I'm legitimately just going, well, I need to do this now, let's try something, and then later I kind of figure out, oh, that would be better to do. And so this one is something that I guess I kind of should have known, but honestly I just did not even really think about it at the time, and so I'm going to think about it now. So what we were talking about yesterday is we were talking about having this notion of a ground point, right? And so if I imagine an entity is occupying space in some way, right? Like so. And we were talking about, having these sort of bounding boxes and that sort of stuff, and we did collision detection on them, and we've got all that working, and it's good. And they're 3D and all that, and so it's kind of nice because it means we can support more stuff in our game, like smoothly going up and down stairwells and maybe fading things in and out and having kind of nice level transitions or looking at things below you. There's all kinds of stuff that we might want to do in the game, so it's kind of good to support that. And it was just good programming exercise. Again, since this is an educational stream, it's a good programming exercise to just handle the 3D relatively well instead of totally cheesing it always. And so I'm glad we did that stuff. What we got to is we got to a point where we were saying, well, if we have bounding boxes and we want to treat them kind of as sort of symmetric things where we're saying, okay, there's a point that's the center of the bounding box, and then we have dimensions out in the direction of the corners of the bounding box, right? So we basically have radii, that kind of do this sort of thing. So we have like an X radius, a Y, oops, that's a Z radius, and a Y radius, and then we've got the point that's at the center. When somebody is standing on the ground, we realize, well, we've got to have this notion that down here is actually the point that actually needs to be on the ground, because making the point where the player's location was, that the bounding box was centered around, be the point that we track on the ground, will make this bounding box sink into the ground, because it means that the ground level will be there as he moves along it, right? And that's no good, right? That's not what we want. So we introduced this point on ground concept, and then we had everything follow that. Now, someone pointed out, actually, in the post-stream Q&A, they asked, well, since we're doing all of that computation with that ground point, couldn't we do something where we have, where we kind of refactor things so we're always using that point instead, so we don't have to constantly get the ground point and so on? And I was like, well, we sort of thought about doing that, and the problem with that is we want these bounding boxes to be handled symmetrically. Like we don't want to have it so that just Z is handled differently. And so we could have done something like always had the minimum corner, and that would have meant that that was the point. But then that doesn't really make sense, because typically when we're thinking of where you have to stop when you're walking, we typically think of that as being roughly where your legs are, not all the way out at the outside of that bounding box and so on. So we typically are thinking about the center a little bit more for most of the things that we do. There's just a lot of reasons why that would also be kind of janky, and so there's some jankiness there, right? There's a jankiness problem. But what I realized is I was kind of missing what's sort of an obvious solution to this problem, and that is something that we do in 3D all the time, and for some reason I just wasn't thinking along these lines, so it's not the first thing I thought to do. And that is basically that the position, right, is not the same thing, as your collision, right? We call this a collision mesh oftentimes in 3D. Basically, your position is some logical notion of where you are that the AI uses and the game uses for things that it wants to do and blah, blah, blah. But that's not the same thing as collision at all. And in 3D games, what we typically will do is, we might have some notion of where an entity is. In space, we might say, here's where an entity is. But actually, the collision volume for that thing is like a whole human. And it's like meshes that are like, the torso, and then there's a mesh for, the legs and all these sorts of things, and arms and blah, blah, blah. And each one of these is its own rigid body that might be used for physics, and that has a collision volume associated with it, and all this extra stuff. And so what we do is we essentially store a list along with that position, right? As part of the entity, we store a list of all of those pieces, right? We sort of say, oh, okay, well, yeah, he's got a position, but then he's got an arm, right? And the arm is at some offset, and it's got some dimensions, and it has some collision mesh or whatever. And then we've got another arm and a head and whatever. And so what I think probably we should have done, and what I think I'd like to do today, is say, okay, we have an entity position, and that entity position is going to be on the ground. So we can get to that thing that the person was asking about in the post stream yesterday that they would have liked and that I would have liked too, but that we didn't really think we could do cleanly, which is we just think about the position of the guy as not having to hover above the ground. It's right on the ground, and it moves along the ground. We do have that, and that's the position of the entity. But then the entity also has a set of offset bounding boxes, as many as they want, right? Which are those collision meshes. So it could have 2, right? Or 3 or more, right? It can have as many of these pieces as we want it to have, right? And so that way, when we're doing collision detection, when we go through the dude, we do the collision detection actually on these pieces by iterating over the pieces that are inside of the guy one at a time and doing collision detection on them. And then the combined result of that collision detection is what we decide to move the guy by, right? So essentially, that's a really easy way to get around this problem that also adds features to our engine. It allows us to have multiple collision regions so that if we have people who are not, like let's say we want to have everything broken down into convex shapes, which I said was pretty much the only way to reliably do collision detection most of the time. If we want to break things into convex shapes, and we have a guy who kind of looks, roughly like this or something, top down, we can just add 3 different collision volumes to him, and that'll just work, right? We don't have to do anything special about that. So that actually adds features to our engine as well as solving our ground point problem. And so that to me seems like a pretty compelling way to get the best of both worlds, to both get the thing that we kind of thought we couldn't get but wanted, and also add some nice features. So that to me, again, seems like the right way to go. So let's take a look at that. I think it would be a good idea for us to take a look at that.
So we have our mandate for the day. I just wanted to comment. I saw Rectum of Justice said, just finished your day 51 VOD and saw you were live. Yeah, thanks for stopping by. It's good timing. I can't believe that day 51 was already however many weeks ago that was, and that we're already on day 78 here. It's just, I comment on this all the time, but the time dilation is crazy because it feels like I just started streaming this whole project. But we've obviously come a long way, and we're closing in on 100 days. Granted, it won't be 100 days of the stream, but it'll be getting through the first 100 days of Handmade Hero, and then after that it'll actually be 100 days on stream. I mean, we only got to the halfway mark of that point, right? Because 25 to 75 is halfway to 125, and 125, or is it 120? I left off in either 120 or 125 days of Handmade Hero when I was doing this project in Zig. And so it'll be really fun to go into uncharted territory once we get that far. But doing this stream with Odinmade Hero has just like opened Pandora's box for me in ways that, and I've commented on it several times in the past couple weeks now, pretty much every day, that it's pulling me in new directions that are exciting and interesting to me. So I'm going to keep doing this, but pretty soon I'll probably kind of peel back just a little bit more. And so it'll still be a weekly cadence where I'm working on this project, but I'm going to explore some of these other things that are interesting me at this point, and it's all going to kind of feed into each other. And the way that'll look is that the YouTube channel will still get VODs for this series and anything else I do that's programming related. But the Twitch channel will be kind of reconfigured again, hopefully for the last time. And so I'll still be doing things on Twitch that may not be related to programming at all. But the YouTube channel, where all the VODs are actually permanently living, right? Because the Twitch doesn't save things, and I don't even know how to permanently save Twitch VODs correctly anyways. Like, I think what I was doing for a long time was just making highlights, and that was just wrong. That was the wrong thing to do. But so yeah, the YouTube channel will then get all the VODs for the programming stuff, right? And any other programming related content that I create, which is specific, to the channel name, is Jam D's Codes, right? But there's a whole other domain that I am gearing up to get very serious about again for the first time in a long time. And that's just going to take time away from this, but it's okay because they're going to feed into each other. So there'll be a different YouTube channel, which I have yet to even create, partially because I don't even know what it's supposed to be called yet. I thought I knew what it was going to be called because I already had intentions of doing this other YouTube channel, but hopefully that makes sense. The Twitch channel will just be the same thing that it's always been, but the YouTube stuff will be kind of segregated nicely so that each thing is in its own place where it needs to be. So that's that. Let's go ahead and jump into the code today.
All right, so let's go ahead and open up Emacs. And so if I go in here to Handmade Sim region and take a look, I believe my entities are still in here. We should probably at some point take the bold step of moving the entities out into the entity file, but not really a big deal. So if we take a look at this sim entity, we've got sort of these fundamental motion things here, and then we have this dimension. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and make an actual, make it so that you can actually have this dimension thing be offset. And so what I'll do first is, since we don't have any need for multiple collision volumes at the moment, I'll just do one collision volume. And then when we kind of go in the future and decide how we want to deal with stuff maybe a little bit later, we'll just have everything sort of set up so that it can handle the multiple ones if we want to, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and say, for now, we'll just say struct sim entity collision volume. I guess there's a little bit of a question here too. One of the things that we can decide, and I don't really know which is a better decision here, but it's a little bit hard to say. One of the things that we can decide too here is we don't really know whether we need this to be entity-based storage or not. For example, if our entities, just to kind of let you know what's going through my head here. So let's take this example of a guy. This is a top view here of this guy. If we take this example, there's two ways we could store this data, right? We have an entity structure, right? This is our entity. And inside that entity, we could either directly store inside it or have a pointer off to, right, a thing that's basically a list of collision volumes, right, for that guy. And whichever one of those we do, like let's say that we take the one where we just have a pointer off to a list. Maybe there's a count and there's a pointer to a list. The question is, does this live with the entity or is it shared, right? Meaning, is this something that we need to track per entity, or is it something that entities can share between them? Because, for example, if we had lots of entities that all use this exact same shape, maybe we never need to store that, right? There could be some other entity, and it just points to the same list of things, right? Because it's the same type. These are both the same kind of monstar, so they both have they both just have this description. That works very well if it's always going to be the same. If, on the other hand, every entity has a slightly different one of these, so every monster, this is slightly bigger or smaller, like some of them have a chunkier midsection and smaller arms or whatever this is supposed to be, like that, then sharing doesn't really work anymore at that point. Each one of them wants its own unique one. And I suppose at this point we don't really have to think about that too hard, but what it does suggest to me is maybe I'm going to point out to it, and I'm just going to assume that most of the time this will probably be shared, but we can always just point out to unique ones if what ends up happening is most of the time they aren't shared. So I'm going to say that we have some kind of a structure here, very simple, like again, that's just storing exactly that same data that we were storing before. And so it's something like this, where we basically have a count, so we have a volume count, and then we have a sim entity collision volume, just volumes, like that, right? And I don't really have a real reason why I'm breaking that down into 2 hops there. Maybe that's stupid. It could be that it's smarter, again, to compress that upwards, but that's really an optimization concern, and we don't really have to worry about that too much. We can obviously make that decision a little later on.
So he's doing a many pointer, which indicates to me that this ought to be a slice, right? So volumes is just going to be a slice, because the slice will contain the count, the number of volumes baked into it when we make the volume and group, right? So that just seems pretty straightforward to me. So we have a slice of some entity collision volumes. I'm kind of tempted to just call them entity collision volumes, because we have this to do here, which I thought Casey had one, but maybe it disappeared somehow. But this to do was definitely added at one point to just, change this to entity instead of sim entity. And then that just kind of cuts down on this. Like, we know that if we're not dealing with an entity specifically in the context of writing it into or out of that storage format, then it's a sim entity. So it's just a kind of, it's not a meaningless distinction, but it doesn't help us because we already know that those are the terms of, interaction that we've established for how we touch any code having to do with an entity at this point. So I don't know, but so using a slice means we don't have to use the count, and then we still don't know what we're putting in there yet. But then over here, he sections off the definition of the struct according to like logical groupings of like the things they have to do with, but I'm just doing it according to type, so I don't know. I feel like I should just throw it in wherever, regardless, whatever type it fits in with, we'll just throw it in there.
So for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that dim, since there is no such thing as dimension in particular anymore. I'm going to replace that dim with essentially a list of dims. So we're going to point to a collision group here, and we're just going to say that there's a collision group off of the entity. Right? Very simple. So we've got the collision group off of the entity. We have the dimension of it, and so all we need in addition to that is some offset that lets us know that from whatever the entity's position actually is, where is the collision volume relative to that, right? Because that is the thing that lets us know how to actually do colliding. So that's it. That's really all I wanted to do. And again, we could decide to make it to do that, which would embed it directly in, and then there would be that wouldn't really be the same kind of sharing, although they could still share these pointers. But let's say for now, I'm just going to say for now that the way that we have this work is they all point to some group that's been constructed for their type of guy, and we're really not going to make distinct ones of those at the time being. So it's sort of like it's sort of like an entity type almost. In fact, at some point, maybe we will even compress this down further and say that we just use the entity type directly to get the collision group for that entity type, and there aren't specific ones. But for the time being, we'll leave it this way, because it will let us vary the sizes of things a little bit more and be a little bit more crazy with that. So we'll leave it in until we decide we really need to compress it down. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to compile the program, and I'm going to let the compile errors guide my replacement of the dimension, which is something you've seen me do a lot. And it's a good programming technique. It's basically you replace something and just let the compile errors tell you all the places that you need to think about it. All right, so for getEntity ground point now, really that's just there isn't gonna be any more displacement. That's just automatic, right? The ground point is whatever the position of the guy actually was, and anyone who's using that will just get the right thing back, and that's fine. For figuring out what the stair ground is, in this case, what we would like to do, excuse me, is we'd like to say, well, we should see which point you are inside, right? And that's how you would get the stair ground. So because let's say a stairwell had multiple pieces, multiple collision pieces to it, we want to see which one you're in, and then we want to get a barycentric thing out of that. So, well, actually, now that I think about it, actually for stairwells, we want something slightly different, which is actually that we only care about that sort of footprint, that XY footprint. So really what we probably want is stairwells just to have an extra thing, since their collision is not really necessarily related to that. What we might want to do is just say...
Somehow I missed that he put an assert in here, that the type of entity being passed to this is actually stairwell. So I just want to add that in real quick.
We've just got a notion of that barycentric piece, and we go ahead and construct that specially. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and make that change, and we'll just test it later. So basically what that means is in sim region, again for these guys, I'm going to say that we have a rectangle too. That's basically the walkable region, right? And that's the area where that height happens, essentially. And in fact, what I guess we could do is we could make a rectangle. We could even make a rectangle 3 here and say that stairwells have a volume that has nothing to do with collision, that just tells you about how you move in them in that way. I'm not sure if that's useful or not, but we could have done that. For right now, I guess we don't really need to do that. Do we want to do that? I guess we don't really need to do that, so I won't. We can think about stairwells in a little bit more detail later. But what that means is this region rect. This region rect is really just an offset rectangle, right? It's just the walkable region I should say walkable dimension. It's just the walkable dimension, like so on. It's just a rectangle that's been centered about the point of the guy in 2D, and it's using the walkable dimension as its size. And so we'll get the barycentric coordinates out of that, and use the barycentric y to determine the motion of it. We could also have stairwells going the other direction by using the barycentric x. In fact, there's a couple things. We could even make very odd sort of slanted surfaces by actually having sample points. Oh, that would be even weirder. I'm not going to think about that for now. Yeah, we could have weird sort of scallopy surfaces. That's something for, maybe we'll think about that a little more with ground height. Anyway, so if we get our barycentric coordinates back, using the 2D rectangle now for that ground point, and the ground point actually now is mostly just going to be used for the x and y. We're going to get back that result, which is how far up we should be, and we're going to do that from whatever the entity's position is. That's how we'll define it for the stairwells. So we'll keep going here. Rectangle centered.
Just get caught up with him here for a second. So instead of that being off of that region rect, we just get that out and then use, okay, so the entity's z position plus that times, okay, the height. And then he's doing the clamp separately. Well, he's doing the clamp actually in the same line. I'm doing it separately, but I don't see why any of that would be any different. Yeah, it looks like that error went away. No, we still have it. So we have this at ground point issue. Because this should be, yeah, well actually he's gonna have that problem too, because he does not have this for a rect 2. So I guess what I should do is go ahead and create this same procedure for a rect 2, and then we'll make a procedure group out of it. Like that, right? So that's a 2, that's a 2. We get a 2 back. There's no z anymore. So we just do that, and then rect get barycentric is a procedure group with both of these guys. Okay. So I think that fixes that. If I do that, actually call the right one. And now this, a walkable dim. Did he just pass in the XY for that? No. I think that this is just, oh. Well, no, I don't know how he's going to handle that. And then this, oh. Well, if we're getting a rect, if we're getting a V2 back, then we can't be doing this with the Z anymore. So, yeah, we just do that. Clamp the X and Y. Can you really not clamp? I feel like you should totally be able to clamp a vector. If I do this, does that just work? No, I think I tried that before. I expected an ordered numeric or string type. I guess I could write a procedure group. I could do like a vec clamp or something like that. I don't know. Array clamp, where it'll then clamp all of the elements in the array, you know, between 2 and 4. We could just do it, you know, like a clamp 2, 3, and 4, something like that. Something to think about. Maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't.
Dim, probably we don't have that yet for 2D rectangles. I'm imagining we only have that, oops, rect center dim. I'm imagining that we, oh no, we do. So what's the problem? Oh, right, duh. That doesn't need to be a rectangle. That's just a V2. That's the walkable dimension.
Okay, I was wondering what was going on with that. It's because that should be a V2, and I don't think there's any other V2s in the entity. So, sweet.
So, let's see here. Clamp 01, or what do we got? Get barycentric. Okay, so our get barycentric, that is the one that actually doesn't have. Yeah, so we need a get barycentric for our rectangle 2. That's pretty simple. That's just reducing it down 1. We just don't do the Z. So that's, you know, really, really basic. So we got that done. And their safe ratio stuff, that really should be defined up at the top. So, because, oops, everyone needs to be able to use that. Those are just scalar operations. So that should be along with like these sorts of things, clamp and lerp and those sorts of fun things. All right, so let's see here. Get barycentric. What did I do? Get barycentric. Still a rectangle 3, which is not what I wanted. So let's take a look here. Get barycentric. Clamp 01. So clamp 01 is just a V3 special function. So again, we'll do that in V2. And for those of you who were using templates here, again, this is stuff you wouldn't have to do if you're using templates. Like I said, I don't like to use them. I prefer to just do the copy paste or to go the full metaprogramming route. I always pick one or the other. I don't pick the template route, but if you're doing the template route, hopefully you did it right.
Yeah, that would be the way to do it, right? I would do a, not a template, obviously, because I can't do that in Odin, but we'd have like a clamp 01. It'd be a procedure group for like clamp V2, 01, clamp V3, 01, clamp V4, 01. And then it would just do all of these, right? I could just call clamp 01, like that. And I'll just go ahead and do that, I guess. It doesn't seem like it would be something that'll take that long, right? So let's just do it. Well, I probably should have kept this code so I can actually write it. So this one will be for clamping a V2, right? And then our vector, I guess, yeah, vec v2 will return another v2 that's clamped, and then we would just do this, right? Well, assign it to the result and then return that. I don't like calling it vec for some reason. Something about that doesn't sit right with me, but I mean, you could, I guess, just v. Yeah. And then do the same thing for v3 and a v4. Maybe there's already some, you know, linalg proc name that does exactly this sort of thing. I probably should have looked for something like that first. Like, do we even have, we don't have linalg in here, but we do in the math. Oh, this is the, no, this is the entity code. So if I call linalg, do we not have linalg imported in here? I guess we don't. I know we do in here. If we call linalg clamp. Yeah, I think I just rewrote this. Procedure. And I don't think I needed to. Oh no, maybe this is just the same as the built-in. Yeah, it kind of looks like it is. Oh no, when is array? Yeah, and then it just does it for all of them. And it does it... Okay, well... It was a nice exercise, I guess, but I didn't have to do any of that. Where was I adding that? Right here? Well, first of all, before I scrap all this, let me get rid of that. Comment it out for now. And then if we, up here, import math, what is that? It's in core, right? Math, lineage, looking good. And then we just say lineage, clamp, like that. And then, right. What's the order? X is the thing, right? Length of T clamp. Yeah. So we'll clamp between 0 and 1, like so. That's all I needed to do. All right. That's better. Well, I'll leave this code in here in case that for some reason isn't exactly what I want. I have no idea why it wouldn't be, but I'm pretty sure that's all I had to do, which is really nice. Thanks, Odin.
Those should have just been generated for you, hopefully. I suppose you could have done something bad, but assuming that you did it reasonably, that wouldn't be necessary. Okay. So, now we get to stuff that actually is doing more of the collision detection. So let's see here. What we need to do is see whether our entity overlaps the bounds that we have. And so I believe all we really need to do here is test those regions. Now, it's unclear whether we want something faster here. You know, when we do entity overlaps rectangle, and we pass in that v3 dim, really, you know, presumably we might still want the concept. And in fact, this is something I guess that we could do, is say that the volume group itself stores, you know, its own total collision volume. So we have like a total volume, and then we have individual volumes, so that basically there is one volume that encloses everything, and then we have other volumes that are, you know, sort of subchunked. And in the case where volume count was 0, it would mean that your entity didn't have a more complex shape to it, but in the case where it was, then you would do sub-testing. And I think I like that because, for example, in entity overlaps rectangle, this is not a gameplay concern. This is just a region gather. And so it seems like a waste of time here to go through and figure out, okay, is he really overlapping exactly? Or is it that there's like a little convex part of him that's not overlapping? That's something we do care about for collision detection because it affects the playability of the game. It's important. But in terms of figuring out what's inside a sim region, I'm not sure we care about that. So I think what we want to do here is say that we've got a collision group. And that collision, maybe I'll just call that collision, doesn't really need to be collision group probably. We'll say that we've got that collision, we'll just look at the total volume, right? And we'll pass that total volume and say that's, you know, that's the thing, right? And so then inside our entity overlap.
I didn't quite follow how all that works out, but I think I'll just see it happen as we write this. But so we'll get the total volume off of the collision. It's just weird to see a type store itself like this, but well, actually, this seems like it's causing me a problem. Oh, this goes in the group. That's why. Yeah, I just got that. Okay. I think, well, maybe I'm wrong about what he just explained, but the idea is that this is the whole thing unless it needs to be multiple, in which case you would use this. I think that's reasonable. Can a slice be nil? I can't remember. It's funny. I knew all about slices because I was using them so much for all this other code that was written for this project, and now I don't look at them really for a month, and I'm totally ignorant again. That's fun.
Rectangle thing, what we'll do is we'll pass one of these collision volumes, like so, and we can go ahead and pass that in. And what we'll do is we'll take that volume, And I guess, well, we could pass it by value. It seems like a little bit large. Well, that's an inline, so I guess that's fine. So it'll understand what it needs to do there, probably. I don't know. That's one of the ones you probably want to check. But anyway, so we'll pass in that volume there, and then what we'll do is we'll do the checking against that volume. So the first thing we need to do is say, all right, we need to actually grow the rectangle by the volume, which we're going to do exactly the same way. So this should work exactly the same way. But then when we do is in rectangle P, it's not just the entities P anymore. It's actually the P plus the volume offset P, right? Because we're essentially saying that, you know, the actual point, the location that we're testing is this offset version. So I think that's all we really have to do there. Yeah, I don't think there would be anything else. We're enlarging the rectangle and seeing if we're in it. Yeah, I think that's about it. So that should be fine. What's the problem here? It does not have, oh, you're right, it does not have an overload. I'm still thinking I passed it by pointer. So let's see. Dimension is not a member of sim entity. You are correct, it is not. So an entity overlap rectangle, this is the same kind of test that we're doing here. So we're just going to say that we're going to pass the collision there again. Let's see, cannot go we need the total volume, like so. And then we now have our Minkowski diameter. Let's see, we've got our dimensions here. So now inside, this is actually the collision loop, and it looks like, why is this saying it cannot?
This formatting has gotten out of control. Let me fix that. Yeah, this is just pretty indented. You probably can't even see that, but like we're all the way over here, starting off this block here, and so yeah, it's, I pointed it out several times now, and it's a bit much. Probably need to do something about it, which is simply, you know, doing a new line and describing the parameters that way instead of doing it like this, passing them that way, formatting it that way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But for now, we'll just focus on getting this done.
Recover from previous errors. Really? It was so hard to recover from the fact that we don't still have that dim in there? All right. Well, anyway, point being, what we want to
Let me make sure I actually did that right. Yeah, so
we need the total volume, like so. And then we now have...
Okay, so that's... Yeah. Sure I didn't lose a change there, although maybe I could just check my own errors here. What did I do wrong? I think this is just part of the change that we're trying to make right now. Okay, yeah, so we're going right to the same spot where he was at with the Minkowski stuff. Okay. This is going to be like collision, total volume, dim. Is that right? Once again, more formatting problems. This is tough. It's just a consequence of the code being so blown up. Not a whole lot to do about it, other than try and find more and more ways to not have to do the line break. But I feel like we get to a point sometimes where I'm just going to have to do the whole panning back and forth and scrolling. It's just so disorienting to me to even program that way. So I've been trying to avoid it at all costs. It's just a big annoyance. So we do that with this one, and we do the same thing with this one, right? Total volume. And that has to be with the dim on that as well. And then we're good to go.
All I have to do is enclose this in a loop and test each one separately, right? But there is one little caveat, which is that the total volume, if there was no volume, do I really want to store it twice? You know, I guess the answer is we'll do that for now, but just trying to give you what the idea is. So if we have a total volume and we wanted to be able to make an optimization, which is that if we set volume count to 0, then the volumes themselves would be ignored and you just use the total volume as the actual volume for testing, right? I don't know if I want to do that short circuit or not.
Okay, so I see what was going on with this now. The total volume is all of these volumes combined. What was that? Was that the explanation he gave? I don't want to... This is part of my problem with the way I've been doing this series all along, too, is like... if I'm going to have a coherent discussion, rubber ducking what is going on, it's hard to do it live, but at the same time, that is a big reason why I think that Handmade Hero is as interesting as it is because he does it all live. So it's like this weird back and forth where it's like it feels really awesome sometimes, and then other times it just feels like, it'd be better if I could coherently play off of what he's saying and either expand upon it with my own understanding or not, because he's also trying to make concessions to this fact, right? As he actually has to get through the thing he's trying to do, so he can't sit there and answer all of the questions exactly as they're coming up. He does like a Q&A at the end where he'll break things down after the fact a little bit more, but that's not the same as like working through it as he's doing it, as the same way you would in like a classroom setting, right? Because he would have people interrupting the lesson and asking questions about things as he's doing, right? If this was like a live lecture with like him, in front of a class and people are watching him and trying to figure out what's going on, they wouldn't wait till the end when he's way past the point where they got confused. You know what I mean? Is my camera? Feels like my camera might be getting blocked a little bit. Anyway, so yeah, this is not right. Well, I guess it depends, right, on what on whether the volume count is 0 or less than or equal to 1. Because if it is greater than that and you have multiple volumes, then we'd have to iterate over it, like he was just saying.
For now, I'm not going to. So for now, I'm going to say volume count is always expected to be greater than 0 if the entity has any volume. In the future, this could be compressed, if necessary, to say that the volume count can be 0 if the total volume should be used as the only collision volume for the entity, right? And so that's just like a short circuit thing. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. All right. So.
Hold on. Let me just finish writing this out, because I think this will help me understand what on earth is happening here. In the future, this could be compressed, necessary to say the volume count. I guess I'll just use the same name as the member here. Well, there is no volume count member, so never mind. It's just whatever the length of this is, right? So you just do it that way. In the future, this could be compressed, necessary to say that the length of volumes can be 0 if the total volume should be used as the only collision volume for the entity. Yeah, so that's basically saying it wouldn't be 0, it would be nil. And we wouldn't be checking the lengths. Or maybe we would, I don't know. You could either make a 0. Does a slice have to have a length greater than 1? I have no idea. But maybe it can just be nil. And if it is, then we're just worrying about this. If it isn't, then we iterate over all the volumes. But then he just said we're not, okay, let's upload this thing with this API, or like let's update some data with this API call. It's, this is outside of the realm of what I do with my day-to-day.
Let's go ahead and bump this out, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and iterate over those. So we've got another loop in here, and that's going to be the volume index, right? And this part is actually, I mean, if we actually want to do this correctly, it's a bit difficult, right? It's actually 2 loops, right? We have 2 entities, each of which might have n number of collision volumes. So it's really an n-squared pairing. And unfortunately, that's collision detection in a nutshell. Collision detection is unfortunately an n-squared problem. And so a lot of the stuff that we do in collision detecting, and you'll see us have to do this when we do the full collision detector in the end, is we try to eliminate a lot of entities right off the bat because of the nasty.
That does seem pretty nasty. It looks like he's going to go to the blackboard here and break some of this down, but I'll just go ahead and get us set up to do this loop. This could explain why later on down the line he kind of regresses, or not regresses, but pulls out the whole notion of 3D, or at least some aspect of it. He pulls back some dimension to the 3D collision detection handling and these sorts of things, partially for this, n squared problem that he's describing, because now you have like, you're just calculating that many more collisions based on how many volumes your entities have. And that might be why, towards the end of the series, at least where he left it off at, he was working on sphere collision, and then you're just dealing with like one, sphere, and whether it actually, because then it can kind of clip into other entities. If your hero is just a sphere and the monster is just a sphere, the sphere just kind of balloons out to be roughly the size of the dimension of the monster, and then you can kind of clip into them, but an actual hit doesn't register unless the two spheres collide, right? Something like that. And then that, I won't even pretend to understand how in depth that is, but then you're at least checking only one collision volume always, and you don't ever have like a case where you're like checking to see if one of an entity's 6 collision pieces, or however many it has, is colliding with another entity's 1 of 6, because that's what is that literally 36? A lot to think about, man. Lots to think about. Okay, so we have I guess we'll just say volume index in length of the entity's collision volumes. I think that's basically right. Well, it would be, actually, it would just be this, right? And we could get the length, or we could get the index out if we need to, but I don't know that we absolutely have to yet. Hold on while I block this bot. Come on, Twitch, you can do it. There we go. All right, sorry about that. Oh no, my stream. Why are we dropping frames? How long has that even been going on for? Okay. Devil says the stream crashed, but refreshing fixed it. On my end, it didn't fully crash until just a second ago. And then it came back, and now everything's fine. Could just be a restream issue. I feel like that is the overall downside. The biggest downside of using restream is that I've introduced another point of failure, so it's not, thankfully it looks like we're okay and we're good to go. We can keep on working through this day, but it just kind of seems like you can't, you have to live with that if you're going to use a middleman between you and multi-streaming to different platforms. It's either that, or you get the most reliable possible internet. You move to a place that has better internet than I do. Like, there's nothing I can do about it because my own internet will not support multi-streaming, right? But anyway, let's keep moving on here. Looks like the stream is holding up okay, but I probably just jinxed it, so it is what it is. Sucks to suck.
To eliminate a lot of entities right off the bat because of the nasty n squaredness of it. And what I mean by that is, let's say that I've got some things moving in the world, right? Well, for every set of things, the computer can only...
Oh. We are crashing again. So, yeah, I was hoping that I reverse jinxed it, but it doesn't look like that's in the cards. What do? You're just at the mercy of all things imperceivable to us. machines talking to each other, deciding willy-nilly whether or not to give me my bandwidth. I'll never understand why it does this. It jumps way up, way down, way up, way down. It can't just stay. Just stay where I told you to stay. Just send out 3 megs. It's not the, highest bit rate by any means, but it's like probably half of whatever my upload speed is supposed to be. Rectum says, I love modern technology. Yeah, but the thing is, like, yeah, so it's like it's a smattering of both new tech and old tech, right? Because the internet is not just like the internet. We have like fiber and broadband, and like I don't pretend to understand the minutia of how it all works. I just know like the software side of things. In some areas more well than others. Yeah, it just does not want to quit being every time it kind of levels out, I start to get a little optimistic, and then it starts crapping all over itself again. I also just can't tell when it says it's dropped 14%. It looks like I'm not continuing to drop any, like, I can't tell if what I'm looking at, this number I'm looking at in OBS is like the total number of frames I've ever dropped. It looks like maybe now it's okay. I don't know. The second I say that, it's going to start dipping into the red again. But we'll just I'll keep this going as long as I can, because I don't want to have to split up the stream and restart my modem and all that crap. So let's just see how far we can make it before it's untenable. It's illegal to make something simple that just works now, it seems. I mean, unironically, it probably somehow is, thanks to just the way all the red tape works. Or it's not even, it's like, it would defy the laws of reality somehow, because you need to get a lot of people together that understand what the actual problem is, and the actual problem, and I'm not even talking about like my internet bandwidth being bad. I'm just talking about software in general. And like, profit would have to somehow not be the thing that is motivating a bunch of different people coming to the table to do a thing. It's like for this, and like the best example I can draw from off the top of my head is like why we don't have like a universal way to program GPUs. Like NVIDIA is doing their CUDA thing, which is not the same as like what Vulkan tries to be, but basically you just have all these different ways to do GPU programming, and I only understand it very superficially at this stage in my learning. But you would have to get like Apple, Microsoft, and Google all coming together at a minimum, right? There's probably some, I mean, NVIDIA too, right? Intel, AMD, they'd all have to work together and set aside profit as a motive, which is never going to happen for reasons that are probably obvious. And now I'm dropping frames again. Do I even want to deal with this? I mean, sincerely, do I even want to keep dealing with this? Because all I want to do is write this code, right, and get this collision volume stuff done. Just how bad is the stream? Is the audio like really broken up too, or is it just the video that's jacked up? Because if it's just the video, I don't know, probably not the worst thing in the world. Works fine on your end. Let's just keep going and and hope that the end result is not terrible.
Really consider pairs of them at once, right? It can ask the question, will this guy collide with this guy? But once it computes that answer, it has gotten no further in determining whether this guy will collide with this guy. So for every dude, it has to be checked against every other dude. And that's the textbook definition of an O(n) squared problem. When however many of these you have is n, and you need to check for every one of them against n, all the others, that's n times n pieces of work you have to do, or n squared, right? And that's that order notation stuff. We've never really spent a whole episode talking about it. But order notation is really just a way of saying how the work scales, right? How the work scales with the number of units. And so as that number of units goes up, n squared things look nasty. They look like that. So there's a certain number out that you can do, like 100 of them or whatever. But when you get to 1,000 of them, it may be really tough. And if you were to get out to 1,000,000 of them, forget it. It's never going to happen. It's like a non-terminating program that runs for weeks or something, right? And so, it is that collision detected n squared. There's not much we can do about it, and you can see it happening with loops inside loops, and so that's exactly what's going on. There's just collision detection has a lot of that in it. And so we have the entity's volume index to loop through, right? And then we also have the test volume index. Oops. The test volume index to loop through.
I see. Yeah. So all of these entities' collision volumes can likewise. It's literally just what I was saying, right? They all have the potential to collide with one of the test entities' collision volumes, and now we're getting right back into that problem that I was just talking about, where we are indenting off the charts here. Let me see if I can do this without totally uglifying my code. This is where something like just the auto formatting with OLS would be worth having, because then you just don't have to think about that stuff. That was what was nice about using ZLS, because then I just, I don't care. Just I save the file, you format it exactly the way, the style guide says they should be formatted, and who cares? I just don't care enough to spend that much time thinking about it.
And really, in each case, that's what we have to do. We have to look at each of the entity volumes. So we have the entity collision volume count to loop through here, and we have the test entities collision volume count to loop through here. And then this internal routine actually has to be made to work off of test pairwise each individual one. Now, this won't actually lead to any more actual work in our case at the moment, ever be one volume in the volume count. But if we were to increase that, expensive to have lots of those volumes, but that would have been true if there were lots of entities as well. And again, collision is an n squared problem, and it's tough that way. So you typically try to do a lot of sorting of things into places to figure out whether they could ever possibly hit each other, so that you keep n very low. Because when you have an n squared problem, the only way you can really ever solve it efficiently, especially in a game context where you don't have a lot of cycles to spare, is to keep n low. That's what you have to do. So you have to use techniques to keep n low. For right now, our n just is low, so we don't have to worry about that. And hopefully the n always will be pretty low for these, because there shouldn't be like thousands of collision volumes in an entity. There are these little things on the screen. I mean, how many could you need? 3, 4? Should be pretty low, right? So that should be okay. But at the outer level is where we'll definitely do it. Like this loop is not going to stand. It's because we're calling move entity on lots of entities per frame, potentially, and each one of them is looping through all the other entities, even if those entities are fairly far away from them. They're looping through all the entities in the sim region. Now, the sim region is keeping it down to a smaller n, much smaller than all the entities in the game. So that does do a big part of that for us. That got n down from 10,000, 100,000 entities down to like 100 or 1,000 entities. But we can do much more granular inside the sim region. We can have things partitioned further to cut that n down further and get rid of that nasty n squared feedback. So that's why I have to do space partition here, because that probably is something that we're not going to want to leave in the shipping product. In the final version of the lecture, that will go away almost certainly, unless I end up being very surprised by how our...
Okay, so that kind of clears up something that I was talking about probably last week or something, where I was like, I thought we were already doing spatial partitioning. It's because we already are, like he just said, in some respects, but we can do it even more, like he just said, at a more granular level. So that's why we have that to do there. Okay, that is good to confirm, because when I see it in a place that's like, oh, did we already do that? I thought we did, but it turns out we were, just not in this particular spot, right?
Profiles look. Anyway, so when we loop through these, what we need to do now is set up the collision between the entities' bounding volumes rather than themselves. And that's not that hard to do. Really, all we have to do is pick out those two volumes, right? So we'll have the entity volume here, and that'll just be their collision volumes, volumes plus entity volume index, like so. And then in here, same thing. We'll just do test entity volume like that, and test volume index, right? And I'll just call that test volume. I'm going to put entity in there. So that'll grab out the two volumes that we're testing against, and now we just need to actually use those instead of their correspondence. So instead of the entities where that used to get, we'll get the dimensions now out of the volumes, right? I guess we could just call this volume as well. Volume and test volume. There we go. Don't ask me why I'm doing this renaming. Yeah, it's probably not that necessary. I'm doing it anyway. Okay, there we go.
That is so painful. That was literally what I named it at first, and then he changed it. He did the whole entity prefix just to roll it back to what I had changed it to. That is so painful. I can't even describe.
So that'll produce the correct diameter for us. The two volumes versus each other. That's what we wanted. And that'll produce the min and max runner centered around the test volume, just like we were doing before with the test entity. But now this has to change because these entity P's are not proper. What they need to be is they need to be offsets. So we need to look at the entity P plus the volume's offset P, right? That's the position of, that's where it actually is in 3D space. That's where that collision volume is in 3D space. And then we also have our test entity P. That's going to be plus the test volume's offset P. And now we've just basically created two entity bounding boxes, just like we had before, but they've been offset. And then we're just going to do the collision detection exactly how we were doing it. All the rest of this stuff should just work. There's really not anything else to it.
I didn't quite see that. I'm guessing it's just this plus the test volume offset P. And that makes perfect sense when I look at it, right? You're just calculating the offset from whatever the origin of the entity is to then test against that volume. Seems super reasonable to me. Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. I think that should just about cover it. Let's double check. Yeah, so that just went ahead. And resolved all of those, it looks like. So now we're on to other things. All right, so now what we wanted to do here is see whether the entity rectangle is overlapping basically any of these sorts of, any of these other pieces that we need. So this was to handle our stairwells, right? This was to see whether we were overlapping the stairwells. Man, I'm out of T. Look at that. How am I supposed to program with no T? Seriously?
You suck it up and you drink water, my friend.
I tell you, that is one thing we definitely need here at handmadehero.com. If we were a .com instead of a .org, then we would have the billions of dollars of venture capital funding, and then we would have the huge fancy kitchens with and special people whose job it is just to bring me tea, right? That's what we would actually have. Everyone knows that that's how you run a company. If you want to do it right in Silicon Valley, you have to have at least 7 gourmet kitchens per programmer. How are they supposed to get any work done without gourmet teas, hand brewed?
I often think about how privileged my existence is, and how fortunate I am to be in the position I am, and that just keeps me humble so that I don't get a real complex about how good others might have it, right? For having worked conceivably and perceivably less than I may have worked to get to where I am, right? It's all relative. But then you hear Casey say something like that after I haven't really thought about that sort of thing for a long time. And he's talking about these people, I'm reminded of that, there was that person who posted, it was like a day in the life. I mean, it wasn't just one person. It was like a phenomenon of people posting a day in the life of an Apple tech employee, and they would also qualify them in ways a day in the life of being a woman in tech, and then it would be something like go get a coffee from Starbucks and then get on the subway, get a coffee, get back on the subway, get into the office, play some ping pong for half an hour, go attend an all hands meeting, and it's just all this wild stuff that well before you're even halfway through the video, you got to be asking yourself, what do you even do at this company? When is the actual work happening? And the actual work that's happening is the people that are bringing the tea or the Gatorade or the coffee, whatever. Those are the people that are actually doing work.
Preferably by special robots designed by NASA. All right, so let's take a look here at what this is doing and see if there's anything in particular we want to change about it. I think for now we can probably just do we can probably just do the same looping. I don't see anything particularly odd here. We just do rectangles intersect on all the things, right? And yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer that we have to make rectangle the rect center dim stuff, but we could try to rewrite this loop to be a little bit cleaner as well. I'm gonna go a little further down. I'm gonna leave that one for now, and I'm gonna think about that for a little bit as to how much we want to rewrite that. So I'm gonna go ahead in here, and I'm gonna deal with this instead. So what I'd like to do here is I'd like to just create some of these and just use them directly for things like our swords and our player and stuff. So what I'd like to do is in our game state, I'd like to get to create these things as sort of templates that just get used, not like the C++ template, but templates like in the traditional sense of the word, that get used in creating sort of the players and the sword and the Monstar when we create them. I'd like to go ahead and make these volume groups be those things, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some of those here, because why not? So what I'm going to do is say we've got a volume group pointer for swords, we've got a volume group pointer for stairwells, right? We've got one for players, we've got one for the Monstar, we've got one for the wall, and we'll just sort of use those as we go. And so inside handmade.cpp.
Okay, now I see, yeah, it's exactly what he was talking about earlier on, where it's like we just have a global sort of understanding of what the collision group is for this particular thing. So all of these are pointers. Make sure that my stream hasn't blown up. Now that I've checked it, it's going to blow up. Sim entity collision volume group. And well, yeah, I guess that's not gonna work because we already have a sword here and we have a stair. We don't have a player. I mean, he's gonna have to do something about that, so I'll just wait and see what he has to do about that, or what he decides to do about that
as we go. And so inside handmade.cpp, when we create stuff at the beginning, I'm just going to go ahead and create those here. And I'm going to use just a utility function basically to make them en masse. So if I go in here and
en masse,
I guess I'll use our game state's permanent storage for this. So I'll go ahead and say that the sword equals make simple collision, and that'll just pass the game state, and then it'll pass this stuff, right? So a sword will just take what its dimensions were. So its x dimension was 1, its y dimension was 0.5, and its z dimension was that. And we'll make simple collision based off of that. And I believe, well, I guess for a sword we don't really care, but I believe the rest of these people, it was always being offset from the base. So we'll call this make simple grounded collision. And what that'll do is that'll automatically offset it up by half the z height like we were doing before. And basically everyone can use that, right? For now. Okay. So for S-word, when we do this collision, what we want to do is say that the entity, oh, there's one more we should have. Duh. Sim entity collision volume group null collision. We want that too for anything that just doesn't want to collide at all. And that'll just basically have an empty collision volume and no actual volumes in it. All right, so I want to make...
I assume he's just going to make all of these into a collision suffixed thing to distinguish them between... I mean, I guess you could also just as easily say that, this for the bitmaps, it's sword bitmap, stairwell bitmap, but I'm guessing that's what he's going to do here. We already have it for null collision after all, but anyway, we go ahead and say we're going to do this for the sword, we're going to do it for the stair, we're going to do it for the null, I guess, or maybe it'll just default to 0, and that's how we'll know it's null. I don't know about that one. Of course, gotta go and look this up manually. Okay, so we have, the player as well. We don't have one for the familiar here yet, I just noticed, but it's no problem. Okay, and then I don't think he's even tried adding that call yet, but where we add sword, and then in here let's see, got a new comment. We should lock programmers inside small and quiet rooms for long hours again. At least their software worked. That's just the thing, though. That's literally what I do, and my software, what I do works as well as it needs to keep me employed. And that is all operating inside of the constraints that I have placed upon me just because of the environment I'm in. Like, if I could do it all from scratch, right? And this is not unique to me at all, but lots of people that solve problems for a living in the context of working on software, they dream up this idea, like, if I didn't have all these constraints, right, and if I could just do exactly what I knew I needed to do, and I knew exactly how to operate, like I know exactly how to build it so that the costs are as low as possible and yield the greatest amount of benefit and productivity to the business and serving its customers, and also for me being able to serve that purpose. It's like this weird, but there are conflicting interests that happen as soon as you have, multiple teams working on all their different things that they all think is the most important thing because it's the thing they work on. It's like, it's a weird thing where your identity gets wrapped up in the work you're doing, and it's super hard to untangle these things. And these are the kinds of things that I would like to make a game about in some very abstract sense, right? But the more and more I go down that road of thinking about how to do that, like how do you properly describe something that is basically indescribable, right? It's very difficult. So something you could write a book about. There's many ways you could talk about the subject matter that we're alluding to here, having this conversation. But for me, I'm realizing just how big of a task it is, not even just technically, but like kind of artistically and kind of creatively. Like, how do you convey a message across that a lot of people might not want to hear, it might not be ready to hear? I don't know. But that's what's been fun about this stream and getting to think about these things more and explore different ideas. Devil said, if only I were omnipotent. Yeah, if only we could be. If only any one of us could be. It's impossible, right? Just that's not even, is it omnipotence or is it omniscient? That's the one. It's one thing to be omnipotent, but to be omniscient would at least get you like halfway to doing something that is actually the thing that you need to do. I don't know. This is too much to unpack here on this stream right now.
Take that as well. Let's go ahead back here to this guy. So when I add the sword, I'm just going to take its sim collision group, and I'm going to point that at the one for the sword. And I realize I should probably do collision on the end of all of these, huh? There we go. So sword collision, right?
Okay, so like I thought, we're going to call all of these a collision. And then if we come down in here, and go ahead and do that. Oh, what has happened? What has happened? Oh man, jeez, just want to paste something, man. Unbelievable. Break that up. All right, so we got all our collisions. If we go back down to this, I can do the same thing over here. We're gonna have just enough room to keep these all on one line, I think. Yeah, just barely. Oh, holy editor real estate. A scarce resource here.
That's it for that. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with everybody else. Not rocket science here, right? I wish I had the same number of columns as I do at work. It's hard. I like having my code be long. I don't like it have to keep breaking lines like that. It's annoying. But anyway. All right. So
struggle
let's
is real.
Go ahead and make all these. Game state sword collision. Oh, that helped, didn't it? That'll help me with my line break problem. I love it. All right. There we go. And when you're verbose with your naming, like I am, you end up in that situation where you really want you want your lines to be long. What can I say? It doesn't really lend itself to this Twitch streaming where everything has to be big so it can be legible on the stream. It's
funny that he says that because like his text is compared to mine, right, is so tiny. But it is legible enough for me to code alongside him. It's just not like you would have no clue what was going on if you were trying to watch code that is this, and sometimes I have to do that you know, if I'm on my phone and I'm trying to do dishes and I'm watching a Q&A or something and I'm seeing him make changes, I have to like zoom in with my phone. I'm like, what the hell did you change right there? That's a bug right there. I got to fix that.
I typically have a lot more screen real estate, functionally speaking. When I'm working, and it does make it a bit tougher. Anyway, so let's see here. We've got our S word. There's our wall. So these guys are actually for add grounded entity. Yeah, so now we don't really need add grounded entity anymore either, which is kind of nice. That will just get taken care of for us.
Did you just get rid of these? Yeah, this here can go away. Okay.
For us now, because all the entities will just work at that point. Yeah, so grounded entity doesn't have to happen. And that's kind of nice. But let's finish up what I was doing here. So when I do add wall, let's see.
Just want to make sure I didn't miss him
doing here.
Something.
So when I do add wall, let's see. Where is wall? There is wall. Here is the dimensions to that, right? So what I'll probably do is say, we'll just make add grounded entity.
I see. Okay. I was missing a piece there. Okay, so we go back to, what is it, make simple collision, which we haven't written yet, but we will. For the wall, I just have to do all of this. Yeah, well, that's definitely not going to work. That is a non-starter. How about this? Yeah. That'll have to do. Oh, and then this is all messed up now. Okay. So we do that. We still don't have that procedure call, but that's fine.
Take that game state wall collision, and it'll set it for us, I guess. I don't know. Seems reasonable enough. Our stairwell, same thing. So here's the stairway to heaven, of course, the place where all stairways.
I forgot to actually assign that. Does he assign that before? Does it matter? No, he just ditches the, where does he?
Our stairwell, same thing. So here's the stairway to heaven, of course, the place where all stairways go.
I was looking in the wrong place. He was changing the wall. Okay, so maybe... Oh, how's this gonna work? Think through it. Figure it out. Wall collision. What am I trying to say? The entity, well, when we add grounded entity, yeah, because we're gonna get rid of that. But we have to say that the collision, yeah. I'm making no sense right now, but the point is we're going to get an entity back from creating. I think we're just going to add an entity. We're not going to have to do this add grounded entity thing anymore, right? Like he was saying. But we still need to add it here. We just won't need to wrap the call. But when we do get an entity back finally, that is wrong. We set its collision to be, oh, well, we have to set the, is it the low sim collision? Yeah. I think that's basically right. And then we'll just do the same thing for the stair. Stair collision. There we go. This is just like not a super in-depth change, but it's very easy for me to, oh no, what have I done? very easy for me to make a simple mistake that'll cost me way too much time to figure out, down the road. So I want to make sure I do not skim this change. Okay, that's got to be new line 2. So much for keeping everything on the same line. That was not meant to be. Oh man, this is super painful. Okay, so that's that. We still got to add that call. So that just leaves the player and the monster. Good lord. Rectum said, if you have 10,000 ideas, limitations like time, budget, or tools and tech force you to filter out most of them and only keep the very best ones. I work best with strict limits. Yeah, it's just sometimes you can't tell where those limits are. And you're constrained by other people's understanding of what the reality even is of the situation. And what I mean by that is like people who don't understand what software actually is or what it can do, how it works, their perception of what they are limited by is colored by their exposure to the tools they already have in front of them, if that makes any sense. And that makes it very hard. So like when you want to do something that is very substantially different from existing solutions, making a new product, for example, that's what I've been trying to do for the better part of 5 years now, 5-6 years. When you show it to people, when we show it to people, they do not, their brains can't even compute that something like what we are trying to get them to buy into the idea of was possible. When it's totally possible, you just have to get people to believe that it is and like believe that the idea works. And then all of a sudden they start using it and it works and they're like, wow, this is so much better than anything else that was available. Like, I don't know, that I probably did not do anywhere near good enough a job of explaining why that relates to exactly what I'm talking about here. But like, in some very real sense, the best tools and tech for the job you're trying to accomplish are limited to what your understanding of reality is, right? Because you might never consider one thing without a very good understanding of the problem. And as somebody who knows anything about writing code or software, you intuitively know that, but a lot of other people don't. And it's when you have to work with other people that you have to actually build something that'll give them what they need, right? And it's just not, it's not obvious. And you might understand the reasons very well for choosing one tool or, piece of tech to do a job better than anybody else. But unless you can convince them of that fact and that and you can actually take steps towards proving that it's going to be, X dollars and cents and hours cheaper and more efficient than this other solution, you're going to have a really hard time navigating that. It's like the politics, it's like the people aspect of it that is more difficult to navigate than the actual building of the thing in some very real sense. And, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, so I'm preaching to the choir, but that's just, it's something I've struggled with a lot in trying to, figure out how to navigate this as a career and as a line of work. It's in some very scary sense, it's an intractable problem. But yeah, you're right. It's good to enforce constraints onto yourself. Like, and that's what this problem I'm talking about is what Agile kind of tries to solve, right? And all these other methodologies and self-help books about, making software, but a lot of them are treating the problem as being more shallow than it is, in my experience.
It's about a 7-minute long stairway. It's played on classic rock stations all the time. Everyone's bored of it by now. You know how it is. Okay.
That's rude. Do not say everyone's bored of Stairway to Heaven. That is rude.
So let's see. That fixes those guys.
That's just your opinion, man.
Add grounded entity just takes one of these. Again, that's a really easy simplification. That's a sim entity collision volume group, right? Group, or collision, I should say. And then in here, it says that the collision equals that pointer. And then it doesn't have to do this map into chunk space thing. It doesn't have to use offset p. It just does it, right? And similarly...
Okay, so that's... I thought he was going to get rid of that, but he's just changing that call. So when we add grounded entity, let's do it for the wall so we can fix that. Instead of taking this dim, the add wall call is going to take... Well, no, it just has the collision baked into the game state, so we just take that wall collision... Whoa, didn't mean to do that. Off of there. And that means I need to change this. And this is a sim entity. Was it a volume or a group? I can't remember. Let's just do that. Okay, let's just do this then. How hard is it to define a procedure? There we go. Okay. So, oh, he's setting the collision. No, he's gonna have to set it on the sim. Because I don't think the low... What even are you? Yeah, you're an entity result, and then you get that out, and then you get the sim. Okay. Good, good, good. So we just assign that to that. And it turns out it is a group, it looks like. No? What is your problem? It's because this should have been a pointer, not a group. Right? No? It should have been a pointer to a group. Struggling to keep it all inside of my head. Okay. Now, where was I? I can't even remember. Over here. So we got to fix it here too. We don't need to change the actual definition of the add call, but we just pass in that stair collision here. And is it because... Huh. Alright then, maybe I don't know why. Cannot assign... This is definitely a pointer, so what... What is your problem? That is a volume group. It's a pointer to a volume group. And that is also a pointer to a volume group. So where did I goof? It's got to be like a typo, right? Sim entity collision volume group. Okay. Well, it is the same thing. I don't think I need to do that because we're just setting this in here. Right? And then we have the add low entity call, the map into chunk space thing he got rid of. Yeah, so that's all. That all looks right. Where did the offset P go? It just takes the position because the offset is from... The offset is in the volume group. I think that's right. I must have lost my damn mind. I can't understand why this, why OLS is yelling at me. If I build it, will I understand it? Oh, it says it's missing. Okay, that makes more sense. So that, yeah. I think I noticed that, and then my brain just totally blipped that out of existence. We needed to get rid of the dim param. Okay, now we're good. And so then it's the same thing for the familiar, which we don't have a collision for. But we can add that. I'll just go ahead and do that. I'm a big boy. I don't have to wait for Casey to do it. And then this will just go into, well, let's see, make simple. Let's just do this over here. Familiar collision equals blah, blah, blah. We just drop that in and new line that. Okay. We're getting somewhere. Now that I see what it is that needs to happen, this is just going to be the same thing, right? Is that the same dimension as the familiar? Wasn't it? Yeah. Okay. So just change that to that. Whenever I see errors, this is why, like, I'm not one of those people who's like fully against language servers or fully for them. They have their, it's just a trade-off like anything else. When I look at the errors and they're just yelling at me and I'm just trying to think about the changes I'm making, it's just distracting. But then sometimes when I make a mistake and I don't even know it, it catches it well before I would otherwise, you know, compile and try to build it and then find out, oh, this change I made 10 minutes ago is busted. It's just, you win some, you lose some. It's neither here nor there. I think that's all of them, actually, now that I'm looking at this. We got the monster, the player. Actually, I think the player is just identical to the sword right now, which is incorrect. So, and all the add calls haven't been updated. So let's just do that and set that to be that. And if we go back down in here, we can get rid of that. Pass in the player collision here. And is that all? I think that's all we needed to do. We gotta change this here. Game state, monster, collision. What else am I missing? Sword just gets a null position added. I wonder how he's gonna do that. That might just be, well, that's the null position. That's not really the same thing because it's definitely gonna have a collision to it. The familiar, yeah, it just gets that. So I think it's just the sword, which I thought he had worked on already. I think that was the first thing we worked on. Rectum said, for sure, sorry I had to step away for a bit. No worries. You know, it's, I get it. It's, sometimes you're just in the middle of doing things and the internet can wait. I know all too well.
Doesn't have to set the dimension because that's already handled. And yeah, that should just work. So that looks all good. We have our add S word as well, and we have our add player. Our add player wants to have, and so I think we started, what did we start, 15 minutes late today? Because I was ranting about low quality software. So I guess what that means is we will go 15 minutes from now. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. So 9:15 is when the stream will actually begin the Q&A. Make simple grounded collision for the player. Now that's in there. Instead of passing that, it'll just pass game state player collision, like so. And then the Monstar, also put his dimension in there, so the Monstar can participate just like everyone else. We are an equal opportunity grounded entity adder. We do not discriminate against Monstars simply because they are Monstars. Monstars have rights as well, and it is important to treat them with dignity, and so we do. So I'm gonna skip this again because that's what I want to come back to in a second. All right. Oh, familiar. I forgot about the familiar entirely. How dare I? Familiar collision. And so familiar collision. Yeah. And let's see. So sword collision. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in here. Familiar collision. Make simple grounded collision. And I mean, hopefully you can see that I'm not doing anything weird here. I'm just simplifying things down to a basic simplification that I'm doing. Nothing particularly unusual going on here. All right, that's supposed to be sim.collision. And what do we got here? So this is just our rendering stuff, which we have to clean up. And so let me go ahead and do that as well. So what we're doing here is we're actually taking a look at that ground point. That's actually going to be fine now, so we don't have to do this anymore. That'll get rid of that, again, making it nice, just like the person was asking about.
Cool. All right, so now right here is what he's talking about. We don't have to worry about this. We just calculate it the way we should expect to.
In the post stream yesterday, let me see here. Inside here, when we're doing a stairwell, what we want to draw on the stairwell is actually going to be a little bit different than what we were drawing before, right? What we're going to draw on the stairwell now is we've got that sort of walkable dimension that we're talking about, this right here. And so what we want to do there is we want to go ahead and push some slightly different stuff than what we were pushing before. It looks like really we just want the walkable dim directly as itself. Its Z value in terms of where we want to be offset in Z is just going to be that walkable height, right? Which is we also know that's how high off its ground point it goes. And again, that's just going to be the walkable dim again. So we're just drawing that using the other things now instead of treating the collision volumes as that definition of the stairwell. And then it looks like everything else worked okay. So what
Hold on, I want to make sure I punch that in right. So we have the walkable. Okay, so this is just going to be the walkable dim. Now we gotta split that up, and that's more intuitive, right? This like kind of just when you look at it, you understand what's being passed in here as we start setting things up to draw. Instead of just like what aspect of the thing in Z am I thinking about? It's the walkable dimension. It's the walkable height.
The stairwell. And then it looks like everything else worked okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to temporarily disable this guy. And then because I think we might have our hands full with debugging stuff, correctly in the short amount of time that we have left. We've only got about 12 minutes left. So I want to focus on getting everything else working. And then we can sort of think about that thing. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow before we do. Ooh. Control Z, everyone. It suspends Emacs as if it were Unix, even though you can't really suspend something. Oh, got a sore shoulder today. It happens. So here's...
Okay, so let me scroll up here, make sure pretty much everything we have going on here is exactly where we want to be. So if I go, what was that, line 485, we can just, like Casey did, just kind of strike this out for the time being so that we can focus on making that new call. If we go up here, we can add make simple grounded collision, and it'll take that game state. It'll take, well, does it need to take dim X, Y, and Z separately? That's how we pass them in, so I don't feel like going in and writing that to take a vector, because it's that actually seems more verbose than doing it this other way. Might as well get used to formatting things like this. It's going to give us a result back, which is a pointer to that volume group. We're going to return it. Okay.
These are our dimensions, and this is our thing for making a simple grounded collision. So I'm going to go ahead and push that on the arena. Of course, I don't actually remember how we did our arena stuff here. We need our arena to be initialized. So why isn't our arena initialized as the very first thing it does? That's just dumb. Yeah, so that's what we want there. Now, we don't actually have an arena for entities specifically at the moment.
It didn't seem dumb at the time. We go down into, in fact, yeah, what am I thinking? We have a init buffer arena. I guess we could do the same thing for the transient storage. Yeah, and he's just passing that into the call where it's the size of the state, everything after the size of the game state up to the end of the permanent storage size. Yeah. And so I'm just going to have to do that. Do we even do... Yeah, this is where it's kind of weird because we're doing stuff with load BMP here. I guess we're freeing it, so if we're using... Yeah, I don't know. I guess I should wait and see how he's going to do this and whether we should make it explicit. I don't want to be using the permanent storage to be doing these load BMP calls, because that's the way it's going to work out just because of Odin's context allocator stuff, right? I don't know. So I guess what I can do is I can initialize it up here, and then we can use it wherever it's appropriate. I guess we're going to have to make the allocator too. But then we won't actually overwrite the context allocator until after we do the load BMP stuff. It's just a bit of a consideration to have to make here. Okay. Yeah, and then adding, well, no, we do that for the null entity, but maybe we're going to have to do something here for the, we're going to have to create the null. He hasn't done anything about the null collision stuff, but we'll see what that looks like here in a sec.
It's only for worlds.
Hopefully.
And so I don't really know how we want to really do that exactly. This may be something that actually wants sort of a sub-arena, right? I don't want to talk about this right now, but maybe talk about this soon. Let's start partitioning our memory space. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and allow it to use game state world arena, right? But then I'm not actually going to do that. I'm just doing that temporarily because I don't want to actually explain some additional stuff that we'll explain in a bit. So not world arena, change to using the fundamental types arena, etc. All right. So what?
Yeah. So it kind of seems. Yeah, this is just kind of a weird thing to have to deal with, to be able to make these grounded collisions or whatever. If I want it to just work without changing the function definition, I have to overwrite the context allocator. It probably doesn't matter if we're just freeing, like, I mean, I free the memory that I'm not using here. And at the end of the day, it's all on the game state anyways, everything else. So I think it's probably fine. We're just going to throw the context allocator overwrite up here. I don't think it's going to hurt anything after looking at that a little bit more and thinking about it.
What I want to do here is I just want to do the simple push stuff to allocate these things that we want. And
But I should capture this. You know, we don't want to use the context allocator. We probably do want to use a custom one, like he's saying, so that we're not using the world arena. That is, because if we, let's see, world memory, yeah, because we're initializing this here, but basically what's going to happen is we want to split up the permanent storage size so that it's not all just going to the world arena. Some of it's going to go to, what did he call it? A fundamental types arena. So yeah, it's just something we won't pass in the arena, but we'll pass in a fundamental types allocator instead. If I can spell fundamental, yeah.
You know, pretty much permanent types. They just sit around forever. And so similarity collision volume groups here. So this is the group. We're just going to push that on to the arena. And we've got, we're doing it on the world arena for now, but again, that's not where I would probably do it eventually. So once we've got that, the group is going to have a volume count of 1 always. And
it's been a long time since I've had to do this. I think I'm just going to call new, right? And it's going to be the volume group. And is that it? Yeah, I don't think I need to do anything special there.
it's going to have exactly 1 volume in it, and that volume is going to be equal to the total volumes for now. So we've got a push array, right? It's going to push the volume count on there. It's going to push 1 volume. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set the group total volume equal to, excuse me, equal to, I guess we're going to define that one. And then we're going to set the 1 volume we actually have to be equal to it. Because like I said, right now we're not actually making multiple volumes. We're just using 1 volume. All right, so the total volume for this guy.
So yeah, I think that's pretty simple. We just set the total volume to be the volumes at index 0, right? And that should just work. Will I make work in progress builds for people to play with while I work on my game project. Yeah, absolutely. I think a crucial part of what I'm trying to do here is to gather feedback from people, but it's important to understand just how far away I am from being able to do that. You know, something like that feels pretty out of reach at the present day, but if I keep working on it, and I will, eventually we'll reach that point, and it'll basically be like a, you know, I'll provide a link where you can go and download it and mess around with it, right? Play with it, tell me what works, what doesn't. It'll especially be helpful for people who can run it on systems that, you know, I just wouldn't have, like different hardware and stuff that I don't have access to, but it'll be quite a while, right? Because even Casey, working on this project, he never got to that stage, right, where he released it. He thought it would take about 2 years of pretty consistent work, and he did it pretty consistently for more than 2 years. So that being said, what it comes down to, I think, is I'm just going to have to be very mindful of the scope of what it is I'm trying to do with a game. Because I'm nowhere near a place where I can like design something, right, and have it be a coherent game. But certainly once we get to that stage where I do have some kind of game prototype, I'll for sure be shouting it from the rooftops and getting literally anybody, even my poor mom, who's never played video games in her life, really. I'll be getting her to mess with it and tell me what she thinks about it, just to see what people with all sorts of different experiences and who come from all sorts of different walks of life think about it.
Go ahead up here into our sim entity collision volume. So we've got two things. We've got an offset key and we've got the dim. Those are the two things we need to set. The dim is really straightforward. It's just passed in, right? Dim y, dim z. The offset key, thankfully, is actually also very straightforward at the moment because the only thing we're making are very simple things. All it is it's offset off by half the height, right? That's all. So there's nothing else to it than that, and off it goes. So that's how we make a collision group, and presumably that should be fine.
Okay, you just knocked that right out. That was quick. So we have, yeah, the offset P as well. And this should have been the dim. And then total volume offset P is 0, 0, and then half of the dim Z. So that deals with that Z problem pretty nicely. I don't understand why. Oh. What? Did I make this a V2 somehow? No. Oh, yeah, that's wrong. Completely wrong. Okay, now that looks right.
Now, of course, we're probably gonna have a lot of bugs we gotta deal with, and so, you know, that's just something. Oh, yeah. If we actually want to reference the tile side meters, we haven't actually initialized that game state stuff yet. And so I suppose what we probably have to do is set up our very initial, just our sort of very basic stuff like our tiles and that sort of stuff. So this all has to be kind of initialized at the outset, if that makes sense. So we'll go ahead and do that for now.
Okay. Gonna have to do the same thing then. Tile side and meters, when that gets defined here and assigned to the game state. Did he do the same thing with the world code?
Kind of initialized at the outset, if that makes sense. So
initializing the world. So when we initialize the world and we set the tile side length and assign the meters to pixels, that can all go above the collision stuff like that. And we'll see what happens here. Probably have some other bug that I didn't catch. Yeah, there's this. I don't even know what this is. I kept seeing this and couldn't make sense of it. Yeah, this is weird. What am I looking at here? Line 1201. Did we... Oh, T-Bob got turned into a vector 2. That's all that is. Okay. Now I think we're good. Wow. Well, we don't have our staircases anymore, and the monster hit point code isn't working at all, but we're running, and that is something of a miracle.
So we'll go ahead and do that for now. Let's see here. So, yeah. We're not totally busted. Our collision detection is still working. Our stairwell, on the other hand, is noticeably absent. And so we have some work to do there. Everything else seems to be working pretty well. Now, we did comment out the code for the stairwell. That is true. But you will notice that it should have still been drawing. So that is something that we have to go deal with. Yeah, so that's good. And I snuck in one other thing. I mean, obviously, I didn't mention it yet. Well, we may get finished. We only have 7 minutes left. We may be able to finish stairwells as well. What I was going to say is I snuck in one extra thing. I don't know if you saw me do it. I was sly about it. It is true. But I got us most of the way there also for doing this. Because now flying entities just have their collision boxes offset from where they actually are. And they can still walk around on the ground just like everybody else. So this is kind of going to be free now, I think, for the most part. They'll just pass right over low walls because their collision boxes won't hit. That's all there is to it. So yeah, kind of cool. We get that for free. Not something to do off the list. And that's always good. But for now, we need to go find out. Let's start with thing 1, which is what happened to our stairwells. And I assume there's 2 places that this could be happening. One of them is here. Oh, you know what? We just probably never initialized that walkable dimension, did we? Right? That's probably what our problem was, I'm guessing. Because if we never actually initialize that walkable dimension, what did that just do? Okay, thank you. I'm hitting some errant keys tonight, let me tell you. So we have to actually set the walkable dimension to the area that we're supposed to actually hit, right? So yeah, makes sense. Anyway, so if we want to do that, I guess, I don't know what the dimension should be. I guess it should just be whatever the stair collision, or I guess I should say whatever our collision, right, thinks is its total volume. It should just be that as a rectangle too. Seems reasonable to me. What do you guys think about that? I think that's roughly what we should do for that. And so we need a 2 rectangle 2 call, right? Something that converts a rectangle 3 into the corresponding rectangle.
That's messed up. But yeah, so whatever that dimension is, okay. It's going to take a collision volume and turn that into a rectangle 2. Sure, why not? How far did I get when I did this in Zig? It was like day 125, 120, somewhere between 120 and 125. I might have stopped right at 120. I think I can just look at it, actually. Let's see, let's bring up a new tab here and check. Day 120, measuring port usage with LLVM machine code analyzer. I think that's what that MCA stands for. So it looks like I'm on day 120, and I don't actually know if it'll run, but I can try. I don't know if you'll even see it if it builds. What are you complaining about? You are complaining because the version of Zig that I have installed is not the right one, or the one that I have set right now. I think, was it this? Let's try that compiler, see if that works. Nope. Oh, because yeah, I'm on what? Well, I'm on that version because I just set it, but I'm pretty sure it was on 0.13. Yeah, I think that'll work. I don't know if OBS will actually pick up the game, but if it doesn't, I'll get that figured out. It's not gonna look super interesting, because there's like stuff that was worked on. Yeah, you can't see it right now, but at this point is when he was doing the optimization stuff, right? And so that's what the machine code analyzer change was for. And I'm honestly not sure how that's going to go in Odin. It could be a bit challenging. Look at that, we're good. Just had to unquiet my Zig made window. Oh no, what have I done? Why is there 2 of him? Yeah, so this is like in the middle of a bunch of other changes, and there's like nothing really interesting to see, right? It doesn't look like much has been added. But there's like a bunch of lighting and other drawing code that gets added between now and this point, and I can't even, other than the optimization stuff, I'm not sure what was being worked on at this point in the series. Yes. Oh, you brought tea? Thank you. Is he doing okay? I'm almost done. Love you. Got some tea to keep me alive here at the end. Where were we here in the Zig? Yeah, so yeah, a lot of this, like the 10 days leading up to day 120 are like all optimization stuff. So it's not like there's too much interesting to look at, but you'll see when we get there, right? It'll be a while, but we will. Most of the work in games is invisible apart from the very beginning and end. Yeah, totally. So you know how it goes. There's so much to do, and that work was actually a lot of fun learning SimD, and I'm looking forward to getting to that point with Odin. But once we get into like using the machine code analyzer stuff, that'll be a bit tricky, and it might take me some extra time to figure out, because I've said it before, but Zig makes it easy to do inline assembly calls, right? So I could just call the machine code analyzer tool using assembly, and it just worked out super neatly. Like that was probably the least amount of friction I felt with Zig the entire time doing the whole Handmade Hero thing in Zig. So we'll see how it goes with Odin, but we've got quite a bit of mountain to climb until we can get there anyway. So yeah, what were we working on? Oh yeah, the walkable dim thing to fix the stairs. Yeah, and then we're making a 2rect2 call. Okay, let's do that and wrap this up.
And maybe I'll say rectangle XY so that we can have other ways of slicing the rectangle up as a quick operation, right? And so what that'll do is that's just, you know, a real simple call again. It's a rectangle 2 returning, and it does a 2rectangle XY, takes in that rectangle 3, and just returns that rectangle 2. And so what that does is it says, all right, you know, the result min equals a dot min xy, right? And the result max equals a dot max xy, and that just, right, so that's just a conversion. It just takes a slice of that rectangle. So total volume, it's total volume dot dim is actually what I want to do there, right? Cannot divert argument 1 from v.
Be impossible to mess this up, right? But just to make sure that I don't, we take the rect 3's min xy, and then the same thing for the max. And that seems straightforward enough.
That's just a conversion. It just takes a slice of that rectangle. So total volume, it's total volume dot dim is actually what I want to do there, right? Cannot divert argument 1 from v3 to rectangle 3. Why do I always think I need rectangle? Well, I still like having that function. I didn't need it. I didn't need it at all. That was all I really needed to do. Oh well. Well, at least we got to write 2 rectangle 2. But what are you gonna do? So there's our stairwell back. So
what? Hold on.
I didn't need it at all. That was all I really needed to do. Oh well.
Ah. Yeah. Why did I not see that? Well, you see that, right? Because this was just a V2. It's weird because, you know, looking at it, I would have thought, yeah, it's just a rectangle too. No. It's just the size of that rectangle too, where the dimensions are walkable. Okay. Dang it. It's okay. It's been a distracting stream. We've talked about a lot of different stuff, and we can't walk up our stairs, but at least they're rendering. And we had some internet issues as well, which kind of got us sidetracked as well.
Well, at least we got to write 2 rectangle 2. But what are you gonna do? So there's our stairwell back, so that's good. We still run into it, which is correct, and we still pass through it, which is correct, but we don't handle the overlapping case anymore, because
Oh, I didn't even see that. When he said we run into it, I was like, no, we don't. That's not what I saw. I didn't try running into it from the sides. Oh god, no. I do not run into it from the side, which is bad news for me. It means I've got a bug. But it can't be that bad, right? I did save that, didn't I? Yeah, I must have, because otherwise it wouldn't be showing up. Yeah, that's poopy. I don't like that. We are definitely not colliding with it, and he is. Oh no.
If zeroed that out, and so we do have a situation where that's going to be problematic. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's see here. So
is it because I just want to try and think about this. I mean, logically, all we've done is set the stair collision, right? I see. This is 0. These are all 0 right now. So where... Yeah, I didn't move up all the things that I should have, right? No. Yeah, it shouldn't be 0 because we're setting it in here. So never mind. That is dumb. Yeah, I can't make sense of that. Whatever. We're so close to the end here. I'm sure whatever it is, it's not an interesting problem. And if it is, I can talk about it in the next stream.
Inside my handmade sim region, we need to re-enable this case. We can do the very simple thing by just testing the total volume. That would take no time at all, right? The total volume test is just this test. It's just entity collision. Excuse me. Yeah, it's entity collision total volume and entity collision total volume dim offset p, right? It's just making that offset. Should probably make a thing that just gets that volume back. We'll think about that. Think about that a little later. We have the test entity. We do the same test there. When we do the rec center dim for that, we'll just do entity collision total volume dot offset p, right? And test entity collision total volume dot dim. And I believe that we just do it with just if we just want to do it with the total volume. And
oh, I was like, this does not take 3 parameters. What's going on here? These need to be added together. And then that's good. And then this is the same thing. So I'm just gonna copy paste that. What the hell? Come on, editor. Stop editing me away from where I want to edit. So yeah, the test entity collision volume. Oh gosh, this is just a great day for formatting. That is so bad. Okay, we'll do it like that. And then this should also be that. I think we're good.
I believe that we just do it with just if we just want to do it with the total volumes, that would work. And so there we go. Can we jump? Oh, that was funny. I was trying to figure out if I can jump over the stairwell. You have to get up enough height to clear it, and I can't quite seem to. I need a little more jump. Oh, I can just double jump. Well, I gotta be on top. I'll hit it if I'm on the bottom. Sweet. Awesome.
Well, let's see if this allows us to go up the stairs. It's not fixing my collision problem, but we can go up the stairs, which is nice. I just have no collision, which means that a value is set to 0 where it shouldn't be. So mostly good news, but a super simple bug away from being on the same page as Casey, which I like to see.
So you can jump over the stairwell now. That's always fun. All right, so I think that's basically it. And we're just about out of time, so that's good. I want to go ahead and say handle multi-volumes here. So as we clean that up, we'll do that. We can do volume to volume overlap testing, basically. It's just a question of doing that n squared test again inside for each thing's volumes versus the other volumes. What I do want to do is I just want to finish up something here.
I guess I didn't have this. Oh no, wait, I'm adding that in the wrong spot. Yeah. Throw that up there.
We didn't do the null collision yet, right? So we have game state
Yay,
null
you did
collision,
do it.
And that's going to be just a thing where we've got a null collision that we make. And then what I want to do is when you add low entity, what I want to do is make it so that it initializes that, so that collision is always initialized to something, right? So there's always a null collision pointer in there so that people don't have to check to see if it's 0 so they won't crash or whatever, right? So what I want to do is I just want to make one of these that's specifically for null collisions. Basically represents no area whatsoever. Make null collision. And what that's going to do is that's going to set the volume count to 0, set the volume pointers to 0, and set the offset p and dimension all to 0 as well, right? So basically there's just nothing included in that region. So that's it.
Yeah, it kind of just seems like I did something in here wrong when setting the collision dimensions, and I have no other possible explanation. And I don't think I need to zero it out because Odin should just do that for me regardless. So yeah. So we just say make null collision. Get rid of... how do I go back? What am I doing? What is happening? Let me get rid of all of those. Ugh. There we go. I think that's fine. I just... Yeah, it's gotta be... It's gotta be something where... What is it? Make returns a pointer, right? I think I got that. Well... No, new returns the pointer. Yeah. And that makes sense because this is the result. So yeah, there's just something about... Yeah, the only thing that makes any sense is that somehow the world tile side in meters is 0. And that's why we're not colliding yet. But that's where I'll start looking.
And I don't know if there's anything else. We could even do it making these negative. Making it negative would ensure, I don't know, I'll put it to do, should this be negative? And there we go. All right, so that is, I think, the end of what I would like to cover for now. I like how, so we can't jump over it at the bottom because the stairwell's solid, right? But if we go up over it and it's just a hole in the floor now, we can jump over it, which is kind of nice, right? Yeah. It's weird what happens when we float down there. I guess, like, I don't totally understand what's happening there. It's like gravity doesn't affect us as fast as it should. I don't really know what's happening there. I don't know if we're having some kind of weird collision thing that happens there. Right? Like, why is that not going faster? Is that just because of the drag? Oh, that may be because of the drag. That's probably what that is. The drag is applied in 3D now, right? So the jumping is going to have drag. Yeah. Yeah. The jumping is going to have drag, isn't it? Let's take a look at that. Sorry, I said I was going to stop coding, but I lied. I went 2 minutes over. Call me a liar for 2 minutes. Tough crowd tonight. Gray face, no space. All right, let's see here. So, you know, basically, we've got the drag being computed here. I feel like we want to knock out that aspect of the drag. So, you know, if we did this, right, that we just say there's no drag on Z. I don't know. What do you think? Because what I want to see happen is I want to fall down the stairwell, right? If I jump, and yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. Exactly right. Yeah, boom. And then he lands on it. So that's what we want to have happen. All right. All right. Now
not that it's, you know, real jump code, as he would say. How did he do that? He set this new drag. No. Where? Oh, that's weird. I think I get it. Drag equals that, and then drag has no Z, and then do that.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. That's how that ought to look.
That's what's supposed to happen. So that's what we want to have happen. All right. Now we're actually done. Yes, I went over. No, there won't be as much Q&A as a result, but what are you going to do, right? That's just the way that goes sometimes. Please prefix your questions with Q:, and keep them to things that we did on tonight's stream or on a previous stream. It's about programming, people. It is about the programming that we're doing.
All right. Well, pretty good day. Had just a little bit of that, internet traffic slowing us down, but thanks for hanging in there with me while that kind of worked itself out. Seems like, we went down to a pretty modest 2.5% frames dropped, so I'm not too mad about that, but still, it's annoying when anything slows me down. I just want to go. I just want to code. I want to do the thing. So yeah, I'll be back on Friday, where we'll tackle day 79 and continue ironing out the concept of what the ground is supposed to be in the game world, I suppose. And we'll just keep moving onward and upward from there. So have a good rest of your week. I'll look forward to seeing you Friday, and take care.